Books, movies, commercials, songs all rely on creating a captivating story, and a website is no different, although not all websites tell a story. In this tutorial, we're going to review 3 sites that provide great examples of storytelling through web design. Now, storytelling in websites is nothing like storytelling in film or TV. You can't exactly scroll through a whole episode of Grey's Anatomy. But while some of you wish that they could do that, there are in fact some similarities. We'll be analyzing each of these 3 websites according to our web design storytelling criteria. The message, the main idea that the website is trying to convey to the visitor, or to borrow storytelling lingo, the moral of the story. The emotion, the way that we drive that message to the audience through happiness, fear, nostalgia, etc. This is something that will become apparent as we explore our own examples. The characters. These are the main figures, the stars of the page. In many cases, as we will see, the main character, the hero, is in fact the user. Now, when it comes to the structure of our story, we begin with the opening scene, our intro. It pulls in the audience, it entices them to stay, to continue reading, and it should have a hook that also hints at what is going to come in the following sections. The opening scene may present a problem or perhaps a solution. From here on, our story develops and expands upon our opening scene. Eventually, there is a call to action, which we act upon. Why? Because we're hooked. So let's examine those websites and find out how we can harness this form of storytelling in our own websites. Our first website is one that we've actually featured in one of our showcases. It's a website for Camp NatCamp, a youth camp in northern Spain. Now, some of you may recognize that this site was built using Elementor and that the language of this site is Catalan. But before we have Google translate it, I'd like to go over its design and examine the way that the visual elements manage to convey the story to the visitor, regardless of whether or not we understand the text. So straight away, we sense a clear and specific emotion. This site is related to something playful, youthful, happy, sporty, energetic, and fun. The splashes and scribbles of color give us that feeling that kids could have contributed to this design, and they were having so much fun doing it. Now, notice the reoccurring colors, like the teal or turquoise and the orange or terracotta, that create a sort of motif that teases us to follow it down the page and join in the fun. Now, let's activate Google's Translate option so that we can appreciate how the text itself is designed to tell us a story. Imagine a place. We'll have to forgive Google, their Catalan isn't what it used to be. Imagine a place where children, boys and girls, spend their day playing outdoors, dressing up, singing and dancing, and laughing non-stop. We can already appreciate the fairy tale-like opening scene and the way it grabs our attention and interest. This is typical of sites with a great storytelling structure. They rely on well-known storytelling conventions like a great opening line to motivate us and urge us to read on and find out more. From here on, the story develops, further expanding, adding information, and building up to reach a crescendo. Here, this place is NatCamp. The design wants us to reach the unquestionable conclusion that I will find all of these things that I'm interested in at this place. Now, beyond the high point of our story, we ease into more details about the youth camp. The characters of this particular story are, of course, the children who have had a wonderful time, as well as those who are promised this wonderful experience in the future. There may also be some elements of nostalgia for the adult visitors, revisiting memories of themselves when they were younger and going to a summer camp, perhaps then hoping that their children will enjoy a similar wonderful experience here. Finally, we have the call to action, an invitation to join the camp and perhaps live happily ever after by declaring, "I want to come." So, The conclusion that we would make having reviewed this site's story is that its overall message directed at kids aged 6 to 17 years old is this: if there is one place that can almost guarantee the wonderful experiences of nature, activities, and friendship, that place is Camp Natcam. The next site that we'll be looking at, this time in Dutch, is a one-page website for Expose, a non-profit organization dedicated to fighting human trafficking and expose the hard truth behind the prostitution industry in the Netherlands. This here is part of a campaign to criminalize the purchase of sexual services, which to date has collected the signatures of more than 50,000 supporters. Again, this site has been featured in our monthly showcase because of its wonderful use of Elementor widgets and the various motion effects like the scrolling, sticky, and entrance effects to create the interactive timeline which we'll be looking at. Okay, let's activate Google's Translate option to find out what this text means in English. As you can see, Google's Dutch is as rusty as its Catalan, so this translation is also a bit off. At the top of the page, we have our opening scene. In movies, we would call it the establishing shot. The designer is setting the scene and the tone, the feeling that something is sinister, something is seedy and shady. This is what we call the emotion, that feeling that the designer awakens in the viewer by using certain conventions of composition and color, deliberately pulling at those strings to invoke a particular feeling in us to affect the way that we perceive and interpret the information that the site is presenting. And all this is to drive the viewer, to convince them to eventually commit to an action. Here there's a dark Amsterdam skyline, and in the foreground a facade of a building familiar to the red light district, the neon sign flashing, "Ik ben onbetaalbaar," I am priceless. Perhaps we notice that there's something wrong, lurking behind the scenes. We scroll down to discover that the facade is in fact a vending machine, using the same symbolic colors, selling something as priceless as a human being as a cheap commodity. This is the first part of our story arc, Act 1. We have a setting, a situation, and a problem. And suddenly there's action. This printout receipt appears. It's clearly printed on used crumpled paper. The receipt documents the outcome of purchasing sexual services, the reality of people forced to work in the industry. We're now in the second part of our story arc. Things are going from bad to worse and continue that way in a snowball effect. Suddenly, it's shredded, thrown away and turned into money that continues to fund immoral activities. And still, we're drawn downwards as things get worse till we find there's a solution, a better way, where we can help the victims and stop human trafficking, making it illegal and putting the money to good use, and how we can take action now to make this happen. Share a video, donate, or follow the site. This is the end of the second act and the beginning of the third. It's the cusp on the last part of the story arc. Notice how the tone has slowly turned from dark to light. There is hope. There is a solution. If we take action, the right action, this story will have a good or happy ending. The characters of this story are clearly the people who are being forced into the industry. There is powerful use of emotion that makes us feel that having been made aware of these facts, we too are part of this story. Here the viewer is the classic hero on the journey, and having witnessed this terrible injustice throughout Act 2, knowing that there is a solution at the beginning of Act 3, this is what the designer has led us up to and where they leave us, at the place where we must decide if we are going to take action and save the day. The next site is a different example of storytelling through design. Till now, we've seen concepts and ideas conveyed through story mechanics. What we have here is an actual story, a true and troubling story told through great use of the mechanics of the design elements themselves. The page was published earlier this year by the Norwegian newspaper Verdens Gang, or VG for short, And it's the story of the investigation of the Tinder Swindler, an unscrupulous man who has seduced and swindled young women out of millions. The format is episodical. You might see the parts as chapters in a book or episodes of a TV series. Indeed, a very familiar and convenient format, which, when used online, offers a unique reading experience. Just as with photojournalism or graphic novels, the designers have gone to a lot of effort choosing the right visual for each episode or scene, as well as keeping the text to a minimum, each line carefully crafted to keep us in suspense for what happens next. Clearly, this isn't the kind of typical page designed to promote businesses, products, or services, which is why we can expect it to convey a different sort of message and call for a different kind of action. However, the classic story arc is still apparent. In Act 1, we have the setting. The storyteller introduces us to the Tinder Swindler, a catchy nickname for the criminal, who is unfortunately named Simon Leviev. We are also introduced to Cecile, one of his victims. The emotion is the same form of suspense we are familiar with from TV crime drama or documentaries. At the beginning of the story, things are good. Then things become bad really fast, and throughout Act 2, they get progressively worse. Each of these episodes, a clever use of a series of video clips and animated GIFs, draws us in and hooks us very quickly. By the end of Act 2, we're dying to know, does this guy get captured? Is there going to be a happy ending? The message here is clear: to generate awareness of the Tinder Swindler and his crimes, and the call to action, which is less direct, asks that visitors keep their eyes open for this criminal who is still at large somewhere in the world. I should also mention that all this really stands out when viewed on a mobile screen, where each image or video takes up the whole space of the screen, with the text appearing above it, which is probably why we find that this new and innovative website reminded us of a graphic novel. As an extra bonus, we thought that we would add an extra website to review according to everything we've been discussing up until now. Last but not least, we'll look at an example that is probably more familiar to you, to show you how storytelling can be used in another way. Right off the bat, the scene opens and it's very stylized, very dramatic, probably drawing on our experience of Agatha Christie murder mysteries. It's trying to create a similar emotion. We're drawn to the attributes, the odd accessories that each character has. What do they say about that person? What does it all mean? Unlike the primary engagement that gets the viewer to scroll down that we saw in the other examples, here there's a clear mental engagement. We're trying to solve a puzzle. What is this site all about? What is it trying to tell me? It's a great opening. It gives us the impression that this agency has a unique style and that they're adventurous and avant-garde. This alone gets the intrigued visitor to continue scrolling down, where we'll find a series of portraits. Some are stills, some animated, but each one is an essay about the person in the portrait. They give us an idea of their sense of humor, what styles they like. Some are more eccentric than others. I mean, look at this one with the pineapple. It's introducing us to a wonderfully eclectic cast of characters. As we progress down the page, we get a peek into what life is like at this office. We learn the in-jokes and catch up with the cool stuff that goes on throughout the day. This is something that a TV sitcom does very well. It establishes the fact that there's a great chemistry among a colorful group of people, and having shared some intimate details about their inner circle, they invite you to join them and be a part of this wonderful lifestyle. Personally, I'm a sucker for things like this, so as soon as I see this simple, straightforward call to action, who am I kidding? Of course I'm going to click on it to find out more. We've seen examples of different ways to use storytelling in web design. We also saw how each website built its own storyline with the fundamental elements of message, emotion, characters, an opening scene, the story development, and a call to action. I hope that you enjoyed this masterclass and will implement storytelling in your next project. I hope to see you again next week. Till then, as always, we'd appreciate any comments, insight, and criticism that you may have, and obviously any helpful tips that could help other users. After all, our goal is to be the best at helping others excel at their craft. Make sure you never miss another episode by clicking on the subscribe button and tap that bell. Thanks for watching. Cheers.